Hello, welcome or welcome back, my favorite movement enthusiasts, to today's session of shoulder mobility. Specifically, however, our scapular control as well as our rotator cuff control, which means that instead of using weights and resistance, today we're going to use one of the most effective fitness tools, which is going to be, of course, the stick. This is by far one of the most effective shoulder mobility routines I have put together over the past decade. It is one that I go through religiously every time I have to do anything that is even remotely connected to moving your shoulders a lot and putting a lot of pressure and stress on them. Such as, for instance, the handstand sway, where we shift our weight from one arm to the other, putting a lot of pressure on our shoulder and even taking it to the next level where we do shoulder taps in a handstand position. Which is, by the way, also a very amazing shoulder mobility and control exercise. However, to get there safely, we will use what we're gonna do today. So if you're ready, let's go and have some fun. For the first exercise, keep in mind the wider you grip apart, the less mobility you will require. We're gonna start with complete rotator cuff rotations. And the very important thing about this exercise is that we do not just go through the motions, we want to actively go into scapular abduction, pulling them apart as much as we can at the very front, going into scapular elevation, pulling them up all the way, getting into adduction, pulling them together, and at the bottom of the movement, we go into scapular depression, pulling our shoulder blades down actively. So now we're activating our entire trapezius in conjunction with the rest of our scapular musculature in a very active yet low impact fashion. If you do this correctly, just a handful of repetitions and rotations will be more than enough to not only activate your scapular musculature, but also to really feel the burn and the pump. Now, staying in the same ballpark when it comes to difficulty, we will move on to asymmetrical or unilateral movement patterns, which means that only one arm is in movement while the other arm is somewhat fixed in its position, and we will have to switch directions from the left side to the right side and reverse. Now, you can pick up a little bit of speed in this movement if you want to and go through it very fluidly. However, I would advise to slow it down and try and still activate the same musculature, going through elevation, going through depression and adduction all the way back, and then switching to the other side. Moving through asymmetrical or unilateral exercises will give you a lot more control, especially because usually in our day-to-day life, we do not go through symmetrical movement patterns that often. Being able to activate one side while fixing the other will help you with all kinds of control aspects we will need if we truly want to advance our shoulder mobility. Having sufficiently activated all of the surrounding musculature, we'll go through a latissimus as well as a deltoid and pectoral stretch. Still a very wide grip. We will fix the stick on one side and we will go just above our head with our arm. We do not want to extend into a deeper rotation. Just here is fine enough. And now we want to actively pull to the right side, lengthening our left side, going through our obliques, our latissimus and our deltoids. And you should probably have a little bit of a stretch in your triceps. Move back, switch directions, hand above your head, and we're gonna pull over actively. Now, this is very low impact, even less than the other two exercises. However, this sort of stretch feels absolutely amazing and is also helpful at releasing some tension we carry around our back and around our neck. This moves us to one of the slightly more advanced exercises. We will grab the stick right behind our back, extend both arms fully, and we're gonna go through behind the back rotations with one hand right behind our toes and the other hand right above our head, and switching directions through an ever-increasing range of motion. Now, for some people, this will be a very short movement. For some people, it might be a very long movement. Don't worry about it. Over time, you will not only get the hang of it, but your range of motion will actively increase the more control over your scapular musculature you have, and the more we stretch out all those muscles through active flexion. This moves us to a little bit of a shorter movement, grabbing the stick behind the back once again with our fingers pointed downward. And we're gonna go through the last two main scapular positionings. being downward rotation, pushing your back into spinal extension or arching it, as well as scapular upward rotation, turning your shoulder blades forward and upward. It is a very short movement, however, it is very likely that you could cramp up if you are not careful to take it easy. Start with your hands as far apart as possible, get a little bit of experience with the movement itself before you come closer with your hands and before you pull up further and further. This will give us the added bonus of going through spinal extension as well as spinal flexion, rounding our back, and we have a lot of core engagement, as you can see, to actively go into this complete roundness. Switch into extension and downward scapular rotation, switch into flexion and upward scapular rotation. Now with the next exercise, we just want to release some of the tension we have been building through flexing all of these muscles, just to reduce cramping and get a little nice stretch going to give us more space to move our shoulder blades. We're going to move into scapular abduction, pulling them apart as far as we can, slight spinal flexion, and we're gonna rotate, crossing our arms over to the left side and over to the right side. Two very important things to keep in mind here. Number one, we want to go through complete rotations until our arms cross over, giving us a slight benefit of hand mobility, as well as, of course, rotator cuff mobility with a lot of flexion in our chest musculature, because we need to pull those shoulders apart, which means that we need to flex their antagonists. And of course, the second thing being that you need to keep your shoulders as long as possible and your upper back rounded to get that stretching benefit as well. And just by flexing our chest musculature, it will automatically help us release more tension in our back musculature, in our traps as well. Having one arm completely extended and the other one directly in front of our shoulder, moving that stick right behind our back atop of our traps, and all we need to do from here is pull from the right side to the left side and reverse directions. Now this will help us open up our chest and our anterior delts as well, and we have the slightest bit of trapezius activation by going from the left side to the right side. Very easy, very simple exercise, however it feels absolutely amazing to go through these longer movements behind the back and releasing some of that tension we carry in our anterior chain. Moving us to our final stick assisted exercise, starting in complete scapular elevation. Pull them up as much as you can, and we're gonna go behind the back once more, bending in our elbows, going into scapular depression and back into elevation, moving it together and down as far as we can, as well as up and elevate as much as we can. The further you grip apart, of course, the less mobility you will require, and over time you can grab closer. Just be sure not to overdo it and take your time going through these movements. With the most important things to keep in mind here is that we want to actively pull up as far as we can, and we want to stay as close to our back as we can before we pull down as far as we can. Moving up our back, elevating and moving down our back, depressing. And even just a simple exercise or movement like that with zero resistance will teach you that you can activate all of these muscles really tight without needing weight at all. Now when it comes to programming, we will take every single one of these exercises, go through them for a complete minute, take a 20-second break before we move on to the next exercise. If you can go through 2 complete rotations of all of these exercises, that will be absolutely amazing. It'll be enough to do that 2 to 3 times a week. However, if you can only go through it once, it will probably just take 10 to 15 minutes. It would be advisable to do that at least 4 to 5 times a week, especially if you're someone who does a lot of shoulder, chest and back training. That will not only help you increase all of these exercises when it comes to your strength and your range of motion, but also go through them in a much safer way. And with that said, once again, sadly, that's all the time I've left for you today. If you liked the video, like the video and subscribe. And please guys, check out other videos on this channel, because we literally have new ones every single day, which means that I will see you guys tomorrow. Captain Cairo, peace out.